Hi, I'm Mickey Delmage of Sherwood Park, Alberta. Hear the latest information from the world of radio, locally and internationally, each week on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the International Radio Report for Sunday, July the 7th, 2024. You're listening to us on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill. We thank you for tuning in. We are here every week with 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. We're going to take you on a little spin around the world today. A lot of stories going on in different parts of the planet. We hope you all had a good long holiday period, either July 1st here in Canada or July the 4th in the U.S., So we'll get going right away. Lots of information to pass along, starting with a follow-up to a story we had on the show. Hawaii broadcasters oppose the governor on media blackouts. If you've been a regular listener, you would have heard us talking about this story. This follow-up comes from Nick Langan of Radioworld. Broadcasters in Hawaii, worried about censorship, are speaking out against a planned legislative veto by the state's governor. Current law says that during a state of emergency, a mayor or governor may suspend utilities and electronic media transmissions. A bill that has passed through the state legislature would remove the media language, but Governor Josh Green indicated last week that he planned to veto that. The Hawaii Association of Broadcasters issued a statement in opposition to a veto. Quote, the current statute clearly represents government overreach in granting the state and county government a blank check to shut down all electronic media transmissions without providing an explanation for why this is necessary, what systems are affected, for how long, and how decisions would be made, said Chris Leonard, president of the HAB. The association noted that suspending electronic media transmissions is not permitted under any federal law. It expressed concern over what is called prior restraint, or the censoring of free expression before information is transmitted or published. Introduced into the legislature in February, HB 2581 would remove the governor and mayoral powers related to suspending electronic media transmissions in a state of emergency. Leonard said the edit will allow media to continue to deliver information during emergencies at a time when we need more, not less communication. According to a KHON TV Honolulu report, the governor is concerned about electronic media being used for, quote, extreme violence or acts of terrorism, which can use social media or other electronic media to communicate and activate crowds or destructive devices. A veto is not yet certain. The governor's senior advisor, Blake Oshiro, told KHON that a final decision would be made by July the 10th.
This is really, really incredible. I can't believe that he wants to do that. I don't get it. This looks more like a dictatorship than a free country when you listen to what he has to say here.
Yeah, the concerns are what really get me. The extreme violence, acts of terrorism that can use social media or other electronic media to communicate and activate crowds of destructive devices. I mean, that's really stretching it. Has that happened somewhere else that he's, referring to and thinks it will happen in Hawaii? I'm really not sure. Very, very strange. So we'll see, I'm sure there'll be some more follow-up on this. Final decision is supposed to come by July the 10th, so hopefully maybe next week we'll have an update on that.
So a event that is popular among radio shortwave fans of utility signals particularly, called Nights XXV, and this is edition 25. On 12th of July 1999, the supposed last commercial Morse transmission in the U.S. was sent from the Globe wireless site in Half Moon Bay, California. While it was a sad day, it was also the date the Maritime Radio Historical Society was founded, with the goal of restoring historic coast station KPH to operation. 1 year and 1 minute later, transmissions resumed from the historic transmitter site in Bolinas, California. Every year since then, the event that came to be known as the Night of Nights has been held by the MRHS to honor and commemorate the men and women who made the profession of radio telegrapher an honor and skill. Night of Nights takes place every year on the 12th of July. The first transmission takes place precisely at 5:01 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, that's 01 Zulu, on July 13th, as we pick up the thread and carry on with the traditions of maritime radio communications. It's going to come from the transmitters at the Bolinas site, will be keyed remotely by operators at the receive site at Point Reyes, California. Please note, due to the challenges presented by logistics and crowd control, Night of Nights 25 will be a non-public event. We regret that this is the case, but we invite you to join us on the air at the frequencies that are listed. And we'll have all of that information, put the links, you'll see all the frequencies and equipment used. Reception reports and QSL information, please send your reception reports for KPH and KFS and QSLs for K6KPH to the Maritime Radio Historical Society at the Post Office Box 392, Point Reyes Station, California, 84856 USA. Please include a self-addressed stamped envelope for an expedited reply. So please note, due to the time required to reconfigure the transmitters and antennas for normal operation, stations KPH, KFS, and K6KPH will not be on the air on Saturday the 13th of July, Pacific Daylight Time. Note that we will post the schedules, including station name, mode, and frequencies on the Facebook page or the Facebook group and in the details of the YouTube recording of the show. This is an event every year, and this is a fun event. They use old transmitters that are keyed up to broadcast in Morse code for the most part. And there are several frequencies that will be used. So look at the link that we will post. All frequencies and times, equipment used are all in the webpage that you'll see there.
Our next story is from the Association for International Broadcasting newsletter, and the headline is Russia Bans European Media Outlets. Russia's foreign ministry has announced bans on a large number of media companies, broadcast, digital, and print, based in the EU member states. The move is in response to the continuing bans in place in the EU that prohibit many Russian media outlets from being broadcast in EU member states. In a statement on the 25th of June, the ministry said, in response to the May 17th decision of the EU Council banning broadcasting by 3 Russian media outlets, including RIA Novosti, Izvestia MIC, and Rossiyskaya Gazeta, effective as of today, June 25th, countermeasures are being introduced that limit access to broadcasting resources in the Russian Federation for media outlets of the EU member states and EU media operators that systematically spread false information about the special military operation. The Russian side has repeatedly warned at various levels that politically motivated persecution of Russian journalists and unjustified bans on Russian media outlets in the EU will not go unanswered. This notwithstanding, Brussels and the capitals of the bloc's countries preferred to further escalate the situation. By imposing other illegitimate ban, they forced Moscow to introduce symmetrical and proportional countermeasures. Responsibility for these developments rests solely with the EU leadership and the countries of this association that supports this decision. The Russian side will revise its decision concerning the above-mentioned media operators if restrictions against Russian media outlets are lifted. So Russia doesn't like their broadcasts being stopped going into the EU countries, so they in turn are going to stop any EU broadcasts coming into Russia.
Yep.
So what does this tell you? It tells you that you need some shortwave transmissions going into Russia.
Yeah, definitely. Or at least some good, powerful medium wave transmitters near the border that will go into Russia because you won't have a lot of news coming in.
It's very sad that that sort of thing is going on, but I guess it's this almost sounds like old Cold War stuff, though.
Yeah, well, it does look like a Cold War when you look at what's happening right now, and you just think about all the lack of shortwave transmitters. There's not that many compared to the past, and we need to preserve them. So there's the France election night special editions. This is Sunday, 7th of July. Via the Association for International Broadcasting newsletter. Following President Emmanuel Macron's decision to dissolve the National Assembly, French citizens will head to the polls once more on June 30th. That was the first round that was already done. And July 7th for the second round to elect a new parliament. Radio France International, RFI, France 24, and Monte Carlo Doualiya are poised to deliver a comprehensive multilingual coverage of this pivotal legislative election, accessible via television, radio, and digital platforms, with correspondents positioned at party campaign headquarters in various constituencies. France Média Monde channel will ensure that the voices of candidates and voters are heard, provide detailed reporting on the election results, and gather initial reactions from both within France and internationally. The three media outlets will offer dedicated special editions, debates, reports, and investigations to thoroughly examine the voting process. Additionally, France 24 in French, in partnership with the parliamentary channel LCP Assemblée, will broadcast an extensive joint election night program worldwide. And there's also BBC that has some programming for the elections. So BBC World Service English will provide coverage of the results with an extended edition of the newsroom and an additional edition of NewsHour. This change affects all schedules. Extended edition of the newsroom on BBC News World Service. Broadcast times are Sunday, July 7th, 18 to 18:59 UTC. Additional edition of NewsHour on BBC News World Service. Broadcast times will be Sunday, July 7th from 19 to 19:59 UTC. So some coverage for what's going to happen with the very surprising elections that were declared in France. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what's going to happen with the results there.
Yeah, I think the world will be watching this one. It's leaning one direction that a lot of people are not particularly happy with. So first round showed that leaning this July 7th, later today actually, is when we'll get all of this special coverage.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, the sun was fairly quiet this week. We were expecting a possible geomagnetic storm. There was a little bit of geomagnetic storming that happened, but nothing much, and the rest of the week was rather quiet. The weekend seems to be quiet, and the week ahead, for now, will probably be quiet too, as there's not a lot of sunspots right now, and they're very, very quiet. There is one, AR 3729, that is a possible flaring sunspot, but we're not expecting much. For now, we're expecting quiet conditions. Sunspot number 113 and the solar flux 173. And just a quick note that it's possible that we already have reached solar max. There's a couple of reports that came out from studying the past solar cycles, and we've noted that solar cycles tend to have double peaks. And we've just had a second peak, which makes a double peak that happened in the last 6 months, since the beginning of 2024. So a lot of the researchers are saying maybe we've just passed the solar maximum now. So don't worry. The slope going back down to solar minimum is a long one. It's several years, so we still have quite a few years left of good propagation. The only way that you'll be able to notice all of this, though, is to use a radio and listen.
This is Skip Berry of New Jersey, listening to International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Now, a lot of our shortwave listeners who have been around shortwave broadcasting and listening to international broadcasting going back into the late 1960s may have been present to hear some of this. But in the meantime, we're going to talk a little bit about history. Jiří Mádl's film called Waves about Czechoslovak radio in the 1968 invasion is premiering. This comes from Mike Terry in the UK via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio IO group. Director Jiří Mádl's film Vini, which is Waves in Czech, premiered at the Karlovy Vary Film Festival on Monday night to a standing ovation that continued long after the credits had rolled. The period drama set in Czechoslovakia at the end of the 1960s, the period of the Prague Spring and the 1968 Warsaw Pact invasion, tells the story of two brothers who have to make difficult decisions about what is important to them in life. The film is inspired by the true story of a group of journalists from Czechoslovak Radio's Foreign Service section, the predecessor of today's Radio Prague International, and their commitment to independent reporting in the face of mounting Soviet pressure. The main events take place in the Czechoslovak Radio and its foreign newsroom, which strove to bring listeners abroad the truth about what was happening in the country despite censorship. The film will be released in Czech cinemas on August the 15th. I would think that there's probably a chance that this film will start showing up at some of the film festivals, and maybe if you have outlets in your city or town that show foreign films, for example, this film, getting the reaction that it's receiving already, will probably start showing up. So any of you with an interest in that, and in particular, if you were tuned into radio at that time back in 1969, I think you'll find this really interesting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fascinating to watch. In our next story, we have Burkina Faso slams international media. This is via the Association for International Broadcasting newsletter. In a continuing war of words against international media organizations waged by Burkina Faso, the country's national broadcaster, RTB, has broadcast an hour-long talk show accusing Radio France International, France 24, BBC, CNN, VOA, TV5 Monde, and Reuters of spreading fake news and disinformation aimed at destabilizing the West African nation. The Burkina Faso media regulator, CSC, has suspended the operating licenses of several of the Western broadcasters. One panelist, Boukari Nebié, researcher at Yambila Abdoulaye Dougouieni University, said these media outlets ought to have stuck to their role of informing, educating, and entertaining, adding that the media plurality is a good thing for any country. But unfortunately, with these international media in our countries, this is not the role that these media play. He added that Burkinabe journalists found themselves in trouble with France because of taking an opposing stance on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. France is not a model, and Burkina Faso must rethink which model of journalism to adopt. The model of journalism that we have, it is not us who created it, he said. Since a coup in 2022, the country has been led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who heads the military junta. So, it's everybody trying to give everybody a lesson about what's freedom of press or not, and what's good to say or not. And this is a war on, freedom of speech, basically.
Yeah, many of those services that they're accusing of disinformation aimed at destabilizing their nation. These are all broadcasters who have programming in French and news services in French coming into the country, hopefully putting out good news. They're reputable services. Yeah. Yet the government there has decided, well, we don't necessarily like what these stations or services are saying. So, again, some government censorship going on by the looks of it.
Yeah, and what happens there is a lot of these media outlets, they went on FM radio stations locally. But this just reminds us, once again, that it's nice to be on FM, but when things go bad, it's good to be on shortwave.
Exactly. We have some news for you DXers out there. This might be a tough one for people to hear, depending on where you're located, but there is a new private shortwave radio station in Finland. This comes from Mike Terry in the UK via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio IO group. The new licensed shortwave radio station, Radio Blacksmith Knoll, has been testing on 6120 kilohertz from Pori on the west coast of Finland. The first transmission took place on the 30th of June at 2100 UTC, and the licensed power is just 25 watts, which goes into a 43-meter-long dipole antenna from a transceiver. The license is valid from July 1st through August the 6th, and the station had announced its next transmissions for July 1st to the 3rd. Random test transmissions during the days and evenings, fine-tuning of the system, and preparing the studio for more controlled schedule. So I don't know what will happen after August the 6th. They only have the license until then. They go on to say that this goes as long as needed to verify the workings of both the studio and the transmitter. Several different methods, such as test tones, music, and other audio, will be used, some of them very odd ones. Radio Blacksmith Knoll is the fourth Finnish private shortwave station. The others are Scandinavian Weekend Radio in Virat since 2000, Real Mix Radio in Raasepori since March 2024, and Radio Pico in Asikala since May of 2024. So a lot of activity going on shortwave in Finland. This is a brand new one. We don't have all the information about frequencies other than the 6120, so I'm assuming that's the only one they'll be using. So I guess you just have to keep checking it. I haven't checked to see. They might have something on the web. You could look up Radio Blacksmith Knoll, that's Knoll, and keep an ear tuned to that frequency. 25 watts, you may need to go and use some of the online SDRs over in Europe to see if you can hear them. And they don't really talk about what type of programming they'll be doing, but it's always nice to see something new and challenging popping up on the shortwave bands.
It's interesting that they have all of these small, low-powered licensed shortwave station. I guess maybe it's easier to get a license to do that there than maybe in Canada or something, because it'd be fun to have some of those here too.
Yeah, it would be great to have something on the air from Canada on shortwave would be great. We really cut down to one now with the CFRX in Toronto.
So in our next story, which is an interesting one, Vernon Kay uses CDs to keep BBC Radio 2 show going after technical issue. This is via The Guardian. Please don't stop the music, Rihanna once sang. On Thursday, producers at BBC Radio 2 scrambled to oblige as Vernon Kay was forced to use CDs to play music on the station after its digital system failed. The radio presenter, 50, was playing Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who towards the end of his show when the issue occurred. At about 11:30 a.m., the track cut out, and he came back on the air laughing. He said, "This has never happened to me, where the computer system has just failed." He asked listeners to get in touch as the screen in front of him said the song was playing, but he could not hear it in the studio. At first, Kay appeared not to know for certain whether the state broadcast was silent, saying, "I don't think it's playing out because it's gone deadly silent in the studio, which is quite strange. But I'm fascinated by it because these things excite me when things go wrong on air." Jeremy Vine, whose show follows Kay's at midday, said he had experienced issues in his studio when he was practicing his weekday show. They tried to play the next tracks, but they also could not be heard, and Kay said they would instead be forced to do some chatting for 30 minutes. A member of staff came in with CDs in a box while Vine continued to preview his show, which was to include general election coverage and him putting on an age simulation suit, which makes the wearer's feet heavier and muffles sound. Kay let Vine continue as he tried to help with repairing the problem, and he played the Harry Styles track Treat People with Kindness on a CD. He jokes that the Radio 2 team was running down to the basement to get some cassettes and some mini discs to keep the music playing. After playing a scheduled recording of his interview with one of this year's Glastonbury headliners, Shania Twain, was previously broadcast on Sunday, he said the system was back, up and running at about 11:50 a.m. A BBC spokesperson said there was a technical fault, which was quickly fixed. So, that's the live shows. When you're on the air, you're live, something happens, you got to do something about it. You can't just, ignore it. So they scrambled to play some CDs, good old technology that came back to help when the new digital technology fails.
This is what's happening at so many stations. Everything is set up, pre-programmed on the computer. You press go, start, and off it goes. And you just hope that it keeps running. Yeah. This is the problem with some of the automated stations. Unless there's somebody there monitoring it and, the system crashes, you end up with dead air. You can end up with a tape loop. You can end up with who knows what coming out over the air, or nothing at all. So good to see that these guys had some good ideas and rushed out and found some CDs and what have you, and that they had something to play them on too. Yeah, because that's something that's disappearing as well. So good for them to think quickly and get something back on the air again.
That's probably a hint that, even though you have that old CD player that's gathering dust, maybe it's better to keep it than throw it away.
And make sure it's hooked up to the console so that you can control it as well and get it through and out over the transmitter.
So we have one upcoming ham event.
Yeah, it's a big contest coming up. It's the IARU HF World Championship. It's organized by the International Amateur Radio Union and the American Radio Relay League. It runs from 1200 Zulu July 13th to 1200 Zulu July the 14th. The contest objective is to support amateur self-training in radio communications, including improving amateur operating skills, conducting technical investigations, and intercommunicating with other amateurs around the world, especially IARU member society headquarters stations. The bands will be all the HF major bands, 1.8, 3.5, 7, 14, 21, and 28. The modes will be both phone and CW, and you're permitted to contact stations only once per band and mode.
And we are out of time.
We thank you for tuning into the show. We are here every week, as I said earlier, 30 minutes per week on CKUT. You can reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com. The program is live streaming and archived as well at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, we invite you to join the group. And our YouTube channel is where you can go and listen to the show at your convenience. Also go back and listen to previous shows. We're on YouTube at IRR. And finally, our X account is at IRRCKUT. We invite you to follow us there. And we hope that you'll follow us to next Sunday morning at 10:30 Eastern, 14:30 UTC for the next edition of our program, the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Radio RSA, the voice of South Africa from Johannesburg.